like a bantha. Yes?
Lost!
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and today I want to talk to you about Andor and the Book of Boba Fett, specifically how these two shows highlight certain flaws in the Disney-era Star Wars, and also show the growing divide in our Star Wars fandom. A little later, I'm going to be joined by two of the best, Adam Lance Garcia and Heather Antos, but first, here's my take. Andor is unlike any Star Wars I have ever seen. It's character-based, slow-paced, and is a top-notch political spy thriller. I will say, though, that it's not really made for kids. I would bet that, in fact, most kids would be bored by it. Now, when Andor was first released to the press, I saw a lot of dialogue on Twitter that the show didn't give them member berries.
What's member berries?
Well, it's from an episode of South Park. Basically, eating member berries makes you bask in nostalgia, and that member berries have been the downfall of like every society. Basically, when a culture peaks, it just wants to relive its former glory.
Oh, like many of the most popular TV shows and movies today.
Exactly. Andor does feature tons of Easter eggs, but they're all in the background, like the Temple of Doomstones in Luthen's shop. Or they're tied in more with the characters and their story, like how Mon Mothma speaks out for the people of Gorman, and that same activism leads to her being declared an enemy of the Empire in Star Wars Rebels. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to relive the things that you loved as a child. That's why we buy fun collectibles like lightsabers. Speaking of which, hey Doug, look at this.
Whoa, that's awesome. What is that?
This is my sweet Silver Avenger lightsaber made by Saber Universe, the sponsor of this video. These sabers are so cool. The handle is made from durable aluminum and the blade is polycarbonate, so you can actually fight with it. Saber Universe makes collectibles that are great for collectors, cosplayers, or just people who want to own a lightsaber. The cool thing about this saber is like the little design details, like how the hilt is inspired by the Mandalorian helmet. It also has a synchronized sound system and can change into 12 different colors. Very cool. Now, the Silver Avenger is actually available for pre-order starting today, November 4th through November 13th. And the first 10,000 of them have a unique number. Mine is 94.
94.
Also, every 1,000 saber is a special make that is colored gold instead of silver.
Lucky.
And you want to pre-order now because all pre-orders are guaranteed to arrive before Christmas. This saber would make such a sweet gift. Normally it's $189, but with a pre-order it's just $159 until November 13th. Plus, if you use our promo code ScreenCrush10, you get an additional 10% off this saber and any other item on the site. So if you're thinking about getting this for a gift, I would recommend ordering it now before you forget, and be sure to use our code ScreenCrush10 for 10% off the entire site.
Now back to what I was saying. The problem is the Book of Boba Fett was all Easter eggs and very little story. The main character's motivations were never made clear. The flashbacks were awkwardly paced, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. And it really felt like it was two different shows. We had the flashback-heavy first half and the guest star-filled action-packed second half. I mean, there were so many legacy characters appearing in the Book of Boba Fett that there was an entire episode that did not feature Boba Fett, and it was the best episode of the show. So, the Book of Boba Fett felt like a Frankenstein's monster of a TV show. And this is where I think Andor is such a better show than the Book of Boba Fett, its structure. We made a whole video about Boba Fett's structure and how the flashback should be used in a film or show. So I'm going to revisit a little bit of that video, but then compare it to Andor to express what this show does so well as it cuts between its different storylines. So let's look at the first few episodes of Boba Fett and how they incorporate the flashbacks. Book of Boba Fett started off in a challenging position. The saga left off with the character in two different points, falling into the Sarlacc pit and sitting on Jabba's throne. So the show had to show us how he got out of the pit to where we saw him in The Mandalorian, and also what happens after The Mandalorian. So on paper, like, flashbacks are a good idea here. Flashbacks can be used for a variety of reasons. They can shed light on a person's character, like in Orange is the New Black. They can reveal thematic parallels, like in Godfather 2. Or they can show a character remembering something in the past that helps them in the present, like in Lost. Now, all those examples serve the present-day storyline, but the flashbacks in the Book of Boba Fett were kind of placed arbitrarily and didn't service the story that was being told in the present day. At the very least, flashbacks should reveal thematic parallels, so the two timelines are at least bringing the audience along on separate journeys that feel like a single story. And this is what the first episode of Andor does so well. In the first scene, Andor is looking for his long-lost sister and ends up killing two men. Then we interact with his droid, waking him up in the present while he's also being woken up in the past. It's a great way to indicate that these two people are the same character, and there's a lot of parallels between them. Both Both Cassians are living in backwater planets and they have no upward mobility, and they are separated from their families. So just as he is looking for his sister in the present, we see his sister in the past. So we begin to understand his motivations in the present. Both the flashbacks and the opening scene also feature the inciting incidents that will eventually get them off these planets, the ship crash and the murders. The next scene features the reaction to these incidents, Cassian trying to cover his tracks and the children leaving to follow the tracks of the fallen ship. The episode ends with the guy at the shipyard telling Cassian to not come by again. This means that Cassian will no longer have a way to look for his sister, as young Cassa says goodbye to his sister for the last time. In both stories, Cassian is forced into circumstances that will eventually take him away from his family, and they keep balancing different storylines perfectly throughout the series, even after the flashbacks end. The cutaways are all perfectly timed, the themes link and support each other, and the characters all feel like they're going through similar trials. For example, in episode 9, every character is feeling the noose tighten around their neck. Now, the Book of Boba Fett starts off really strong. He's in the Sarlacc, left for dead by Jawas, captured by Tuskens. He starts off at the bottom, but this is intercut with him at the top as Jabba's successor. And this is where the story starts to stumble because we don't really know why Boba Fett wants to be a crime lord. So we naturally suspect that this will be revealed in the flashbacks, and it's really not. In the present day, he is attacked, and so he goes into Bacta, and the Bacta is a big problem because it forces the flashbacks upon Boba Fett instead of him just remembering events that can aid him in the present. Now, in the pilot's second flashback, he wins the respect of the Tuskens and is no longer their prisoner, and the episode just ends. Now, imagine this was structured a bit differently, where Boba Fett in the past wins the respect of the Tuskens, and then in the present, he remembers this incident and beats up a rival gangster to win the respect of the town. But this flashback to how he won the respect of the Tuskens has no effect in the present story. In episode 2, he just does the same thing. He wakes up, walks to town, meets adversaries like the Hutts and Kersantin, but nothing happens. Nothing happens. But the next flashback is great. He leads the Tuskens on a heist and joins the tribe. Now that's at the end of episode 2, but this flashback has nothing to do with the present day events of episode 2. However, it does tie in with the events of episode 3 where he recruits the mods. But then in the episode 3 flashback, the Tuskens are slaughtered after Boba Fett is one of them for just a few minutes of screen time. Now imagine if this was just, reorganized just a bit. The first episode shows Boba Fett being attacked on the street and then being captured by the Tuskens. The second episode shows Boba Fett winning the respect of the tribe and then beating up the mayor's goons. The third episode starts with the slaughter of the Tuskens, and so in the present, Boba needs a new tribe, the Mods. But instead, the flashbacks seem randomly placed, just so they can get these two storylines out of the way so they can set up the big action figure slugfest in the finale. And by the way, I love the finale. Loved Mando reuniting with Grogu, Boba Fett riding a Rancor, this weird turn the Mod does for no reason before shooting, but the show did not lay any emotional groundwork to earn this action to make me care about the characters in the fight, except for Mando and Grogu. So what I'm saying is, this show needs more scenes like Cyril slurping a cereal to shut up his mother.
Imagine I cracked under the weight of your neglect.
And now we're joined by two of the best Star Wars people that I know. We have author Adam Lance Garcia and senior editor at IDW Comics, Heather Antos. I really want to know what you guys think about this. What is it about the Book of Boba Fett that appealed to people so much as opposed to Andor? And, what are your feelings on it? Do you prefer Andor to Book of Boba Fett or the other way around? Heather, do you want to go first?
First off, thanks for having me back. I think when it comes to Book of Boba Fett, what made that show so popular right off the gate is this is a character that we've been wanting more live action stories about for quite literally 40 years. And, whether you loved or hated the show, we wanted to see it. We wanted to see what would happen. We wanted to see more of this character, more of his story, especially after getting, that little tease of him in The Mandalorian, which I think was very, very well received in The Mandalorian. I think something with Andor, it has struggled, at least from my point of view, to maintain that same large audience. I think you were right in that, it's a newer character, it's a more obscure time period, and quite frankly, there's no pew pew, buzz buzz, lightsaber, Sith, Jedi, stuff that the general population tends to associate when it comes to Star Wars. We want to see the Skywalker saga, we want to see, those classic trilogy characters, familiar faces, and so I think there's not as much of a sense of immediacy to watch the show, which sucks because it's such a great show. And it's such a great show, not just for Star Wars, but just in general. And I was discussing it with friends earlier. I think it's because, it's not necessarily about the world of Star Wars, even though it takes place in the world of Star Wars, but at the end of the day, Andor is a story of the human experience under very, very extreme circumstances. And, you know, it's very relatable circumstances in the world we live in today, and the history of the world. And, you know, Tony Gilroy has done such an incredible job with world building and telling the human experience, and I'm so excited to see where they continue to take it.
Okay, those are all really great points, and you brought up like how Andor feels relevant to today, and I think you might have touched on something there, because Star Wars has always been about nostalgia. It was built from George Lucas's nostalgia. It's a mishmash of different things that we loved as kids in movies. It's like every favorite movie you ever had rolled into one movie. And, you know, Grace Randolph in her first review kind of trended on the internet for a while because she said it didn't give me member berries talking about Andor. So I wonder if nostalgia is like an essential ingredient to Star Wars being popular, whether it's nostalgia for the prequels, for old serials that you watched in the 1950s, or for the original trilogy. Adam, what do you think? What's your take on Andor, nostalgia, and the show in general?
I mean, to the earlier point about like the appeal of Book of Boba Fett, that's definitely like a nostalgia play. Like, people were pursuing that show because, to Heather's point, 40 years of history, we want to see this character. And I don't necessarily know if the original Star Wars had just complete nostalgia. It was George Lucas's nostalgia, but what made people excited about that movie was, if you've never watched the original movie serials, which inspired him, you were still excited by this new thing he created. So I don't think that at the time what made Star Wars was this sort of gestalt nostalgia. It was this like, wow, this is a really great story that's really a lot of fun to watch. It's since become, in a lot of ways, trying to, and this is a larger sort of cultural issue right now, where people are focusing on nostalgia. They're mistaking Easter eggs and nostalgia and member berries for quality storytelling. In my mind, Andor is a better understanding of what makes Star Wars than a lot of some of the stuff that's kind of gotten to the zeitgeist. As much as I enjoy The Mandalorian, I think it's a lot of fun to watch. It's a really great Western. I don't think it has the depth that Andor has. I think I watch Andor, and again, to Heather's point, there's a human experience. There's complex characters. There's something very visceral in this story, and it has something to say. I think that's the biggest thing that I keep on going back to, where, you know, it's the original Star Wars was, yeah, it had nostalgia, George Lucas nostalgia, but it was about the Vietnam War. You know, you look at all the social commentary and political commentary is hidden in this, you know, fun adventure story. And that's what Andor is. It kind of strips away some of the sort of fun and focuses instead on just what it's like to be in this universe. I'll be honest, I wasn't someone who was really excited for this series. As much as I really enjoy Rogue One, I am not as enamored with it as a large part of the audience is. I think it speaks to a lot of people in a way that it doesn't speak to me. So when Andor was announced, I was like, who needs this series? Why is this series happening? But I have to be honest, I've eaten those words. This is very much in line, this specific series, Andor, is very much in line with the kind of things I want from Star Wars. I don't think every single show should be Andor, but the quality of the writing, the world building, the sets designs, the way the show is shot, there's just a love and care that is put into literally every single frame, while telling a very, you know, human political story, is kind of what I want to see from Star Wars. I think that, you know, even from like a production level, as much as I think the volume has enhanced our ways and opened up ways of telling stories, it does have its limits. And I think looking at a show like Andor, in the way that these sets have been built out, you feel the universe, you feel the world in a way that I haven't really felt in a lot of the other Star Wars series that have come out. It bums me out that it's not doing as well, or it's not hitting the zeitgeist in the way that like The Mandalorian is, but it is by far the best Star Wars TV series that's been produced so far. That's including animation, as much as I love Clone Wars. And it really, because I don't think Clone Wars was as consistent as this is. I don't think it was as nuanced as this is. I think it's just, for me, it is very much what I've kind of been wanting to see from Star Wars TV since they came out.
Heather, how about you? So we're all talking like, oh, we love Andor so much, it's so good. But what is it about Andor up to where we are now that's like really, really spoken to you? What do you love about this show?
I mean, stakes are set from go. You could have never seen anything Star Wars ever before in your life, and you know exactly what this world is. You know who Cassian is, and that he doesn't really know who he is. Yeah, the all the different angles and perspectives. Getting to see the Empire like truly be evil and truly be scary. You know, getting to see the ISB and like they really love being cruel and they are on a mission and they are not going to stop, and that is terrifying. You know, to get to see like the true colors of fascism in the Star Wars universe beyond unlimited power is terrifying, and they're doing such a good job at showing the different levels and competitive nature of that within the Star Wars universe. Beyond, I think Cyril and Cassian make very interesting parallels in this story. Of you see how two young men of roughly the same age are getting radicalized by the rebellion and by the Empire, and these are two lost boys, for lack of a better term, who don't really have their own family, whether it's a found family or whether it's the mother we never want to have, try and find their way through the world. Oh, that actress does such a great job that I cringe every time she's on. I'm like, well, we can skip this thing because this is just going to be cruel. But Andor does a really good job of showing these parallels, and it's not really something that I picked up on the first time, you know, I watched these episodes. As I continue to rewatch and go back, you see like, oh, we're showing how these two men are being radicalized throughout, and that's really, really fascinating because I don't think we've really seen such parallels before in live action. I think the YA novel Lost Stars did a really good job of showing the parallels.
Absolutely.
And Rebellion and the Empire, but we've never quite gotten it to this extreme, and it's really, really impressive. And quite frankly, you know, a TV show is the perfect playground for that. We don't really have the time to do that in any of the features, so yeah.
To go off Heather's point, I think that what's great about this series is if you didn't know anything about Star Wars, it works. And that goes not just from the quality of the writing, the world building, that like you can dive into this completely blind and understand everything that's going on. I think the only thing you might not understand is what 5 BBY is at the beginning of the series. Like that's the only thing that an outside fan might not understand. Everything else, from the way the characters are, the way the Empire is portrayed, the way the rebellion is portrayed, it all feels like you could go into this blind. And then that's sort of the flip side of that, is like how they use the Easter eggs and cameos and the legacy characters. The thing that I think is so fascinating to me is Mon Mothma, and how she's gone from this, you know, we always had this idea of who she was, this stoic leader of the rebellion, eventually going to be the leader of the New Republic. We have this perfect version of her. Now we get to finally see her for who she really is, and she's complex and flawed, and that's how you do it. Like, if you're going to bring in Wolf Yularen, like, bring him in the way they did in this show. It's like, if you don't know who he is, it doesn't matter. You understand that he's in charge of the ISB. But if you know who he is, it's at the little sort of like the little bonus. It doesn't feel like something that I think Boba Fett did was as cool as it was to see Blarka Stanson or Cad Bane. I think especially with Cad Bane, if you didn't know who he was, he kind of comes and gets shot, and it's supposed to mean something to us. But if I haven't watched those Clone Wars episodes and watched those deleted scenes, it doesn't feel like a satisfying payoff. But you know, if you don't know who Mon Mothma is, you were invested in her story the entire way through.
I just want to interrupt you for a sec to say the way they handled Black Chrysanthemum was done perfectly, and you're wrong.
No. I will. I will be the first one to admit, like, I tripped over that one. I was just like, yep, that was the good example. So I could retake that because you are completely correct, Heather.
Nope, it's all staying in. In case any of you don't know, Heather was editor of the Star Wars comics at Marvel when Black K was introduced. So she had a very direct hand in the creation of the character and is very protective of the character. And then Adam just dissed it right in front of her, like.
No, but I will say though, Heather's right. Like Black Chrysanthemum was a good cameo because we are introduced to this badass bounty hunter, and if you don't know who he is in the Book of Boba Fett, it doesn't matter. He's a badass Wookiee bounty hunter. Whereas Cad Bane was a poor execution of an Easter egg, of a cameo. But I think, if anything, Andor is just in every single way, from the throwaway lines of like references to the old West End games to having again Wolf Yularen, or the fact that like Mon Mothma's daughter had this Lita, I think her name is. Like the fact that like these are all references to things that were pre-existing from the old EU to the current canon. But if you don't know what those mean, it doesn't matter. You understand within in the context of the story that what it means. And I think, and that's, I wish more franchises, both in Star Wars and beyond it, were like this, that they were able to take these things that from the universe and sort of make them work within the story. And you don't have to know anything about them.
I think it comes, like, yes, this Andor is a very, very Star Wars story for all the reasons that we discussed previously, but I think, Tony Gilroy and his writer's room and all the other directors, at the end of the day, they're telling a great story that just happens to be in the Star Wars universe. They're not 100%. Telling, a Star Wars sandbox story, and then let's hope it works out in the end. And I think that's what has consistently stood out for me with this is a show that I could have my father watch, and my dad, who loves spy movies, who loves espionage, but isn't a big sci-fi person, he would love this, and I think that's what's really, really cool about Andor versus The Mandalorian versus Book of Boba Fett, whereas those are so ingrained in Star Wars nostalgia, and it feels like they're made specific for a specific type of fan, which is fine and great. But Andor is a show that I think truly anyone could watch and enjoy, so long as they like the darker side of spy thrillers.
No, I was also going to say, like, the other thing about it is one of the big differences is the pacing and structure of Andor, which I think to Heather's point, like The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, are a lot more propulsive in terms of the way they're telling their narratives. It's a lot more action-oriented, a lot more adventure, a lot more adventure. It's a lot more exciting, sort of right out of the gate. And there's an appeal to that, and it is very exciting to sit down and watch these shows. But I will say, like, the thing with Andor, the slow build, this sort of like 3-episode structure, makes everything pay off in such a thrilling way. The heist episode is one of the best hours of TV I've seen in years. Honestly, this episode 9, this week's, is one of the most tense experiences I've ever had watching a TV show, because of all the work that's been put in to the characters, into the world, into the narrative, so that when we get to the place that we are with Cassian in prison, and everything building towards what is probably going to be a prison breakout in the next episode, it all feels natural, but you feel tense. You feel these characters in a way that, in their predicament, in a way that I don't really think I've ever been able to connect to in The Mandalorian, in the Book of Boba Fett, and really any of the other, like, even the animated series. And again, I love those shows. I think they're great. But I just am connecting with Andor in a way that I haven't really in live action Star Wars TV yet.
All right, thank you both very much for joining me. Adam Lance Garcia, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Adam Lance Garcia, on Instagram at Adam L. Garcia, and you can probably find me on the street and follow me around.
And Heather Antos, where can the people find you?
Certainly not on the streets. I don't leave my house. But you can stalk me online at Heather Antos on all the things.
And guys, don't forget, the Silver Revenger lightsaber is available for pre-order at a discounted price from November 4th to 13th at Saber Universe. So take advantage of it. Use my promo code ScreenCrush10, link in the description. But I want to know what you guys think about all this. Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.